Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign seems to have renewed energy and success after a poorly managed rollout earlier this year. But during the last several days, her chief rival for the Democratic nomination, Senator Bernie Sanders, has begun taking more swipes at Clinton over her previous positions on a number of divisive issues, including the Keystone Pipeline, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, marriage equality, and the Defense of Marriage Act. So are the gloves off between the Democratic Socialist senator from Vermont and the former Secretary of State? Let's talk about it with former White House counsel to President Bill Clinton and longtime Clinton loyalist Lanny Davis. He's also an author, political commentator, and the executive VP of the strategic communications firm Levick. He joins me from our nation's capital.
Hi, Larry.
Lanny, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to be on the show.
Lanny, Hillary has had a nice last couple of weeks. She did well in the debates. Bernie Sanders threw her a lifeline. Enough with the damn emails. She, I thought, weathered the storm during the investigation. And a likely rival, Vice President Biden, has decided not to run. Are you surprised that Hillary has done so well this last couple of weeks?
I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised it took so long. But it was the unfiltered Hillary, the one that I've known for 46 years, who you saw on the debate. Nobody who knows Hillary Clinton was surprised, other than the media that's been pounding at her, going, oh, my God, she was good. This is Hillary Clinton. What you saw in 11 hours in front of the haranguing Republicans was Hillary Clinton, the real Hillary Clinton. And that's why she's such a capable and, I think, excellent political candidate, because she's being herself.
We'll get into the haranguing Republicans in a minute, Lanny, but recently there's been kind of an unforced error. She was talking about DOMA, the Defense of Marriages Act, and she said, well, the reason that her husband and she initially supported it is not that overwhelmingly Americans supported traditional marriage at the time, not that there was a bipartisan bill that was signed by Bill Clinton where both Republicans and Democrats supported DOMA, but that we did it to stave off something worse. And the something worse, I would assume, is that had they not signed this bill, there would have been an amendment to the Constitution that would have banned same-sex marriage. Even Hillary Rosen, a longtime Democratic aide and strategist, says that's BS. I was there. That was not the real reason. Why would Hillary come up with this reason now when most people didn't even think this was a major issue in the campaign?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether Hillary Rosen meant to be taken literally, because it sounds like a psychotherapist telling me what the real reason that somebody else has, and you've got to get into that person's brain. But Hillary, I respect greatly, Rosen as well as Clinton. But what she said on the interview that I just saw was absolutely true. She changed her mind over a period of years on the issue of legalized marriage, recognizing marriage between same-sex partners. So did Barack Obama. So did Bill Clinton. So did I. I'm a liberal Democrat. Thank goodness for our children and for the change in our culture that we now recognize that love is love, whether it's same-sex or not, and marriage should be recognized.
Lanny.
So she said that. She said that, and I think admits that for a long time, she said she evolved over time. But it's also true that there was something a lot worse, and that the Republicans did want a constitutional amendment. So that could be true as well. They're not mutually exclusive.
I don't recall any serious movement to change the Constitution in those days. What I remember in those days is that overwhelmingly Americans supported traditional marriage. Barack Obama supported traditional marriage. It's true that we've all evolved on this issue. But at the time, the truth was that it was a popular bill, and she and her husband supported it. Isn't that the truth?
That is the truth, and it is also the truth if you go back and do your Google search, that the right-wing Christian, that's my method of research, right? The Christian right had for a long time wanted to embed in the Constitution, as well as in state constitutions, that a marriage must be between a woman and a man or different sexes. So there was always that threat from the Christian right to cement that policy into either a state or the U.S. Constitution. But I do agree that the primary phenomenon, reality, was changing minds over the 90s into the 2000s, and Hillary Clinton says that, has said that many times. So has Bill Clinton, so has Barack Obama, so has most of us.
Fair enough. Let's talk Benghazi. Optically, I think Hillary hit a home run. I thought she was calm. There was no moment where she said, at this point, what difference does it make? There was no moment like that. And I think that a lot of the air in the Benghazi committee, Lanny, was taken out of the room when people like McCarthy said that essentially we were doing this for political purposes. You had another Republican named Hanna who said the same thing. A staff member of the committee resigned, apparently, because he felt it was a political witch hunt. So I think a lot of people were primed to believe that this whole thing was just a charade. That said, there were some, in my opinion, bombshells. One of which was that Hillary right away told her family it was a terror attack, told Libyan officials it was a terror attack, told the Prime Minister of Egypt that it was a terror attack, yet she told us that it was inspired because of a video, told the family members of the 4 dead Americans the same thing, and pointedly told them that she was going to prosecute the video maker and bring him to justice. Now, why did she tell us one thing and told her family a different thing, Lanny?
Okay, I think there's a very similar answer here, but let's start with an indisputable fact that was omitted throughout the entire hearing and for most of the press coverage, as the Republicans have dwelled on this. And let me give you the fact, and again, I challenge you to say, when you check on it, that I'm wrong. The CIA, in the first talking points written the day after the attack, wrote the sentence, "This attack originated from spontaneous demonstrations that were triggered by an anti-Muslim video." They also said, "We have contrary intelligence that it was planned." And that was in the first talking points that went throughout until Susan Rice went on television. So the CIA originated that concept of spontaneous demonstration, but there was a lot of confusion as to really what the source was. I am assuming, because I don't know, that Hillary Clinton observed the armory and the violence that occurred, and she had her own private assumption that it was also planned, not necessarily exclusive from the argument that the CIA made, that it was a spontaneous demonstration that triggered it. Over about 14 days, that story kept changing from the CIA and from other sources until finally there was a recognition that it was a planned terrorist attack. In other words, I'm sorry for the length of time, they are not mutually exclusive. Hillary Clinton, I am assuming, I do not know, could have believed both, but was more leaning in the direction of it being a planned attack, while the CIA was saying it originated in the early days, it originated from a spontaneous demonstration. And that's what the Republican Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives said. There was no intentional misleading of the American people about the origins of the attack. Hillary Clinton could have believed both of those things, and the word lie is simply inappropriate.
Why do you suppose she was definitive when she told this to Chelsea, definitive when she told this to the Libyan officials, definitive when she told the Prime Minister of Egypt?
Well, I assume people are telling the truth and that that's what they believe. She also had contrary statements being made by the CIA and many, many others that the original trigger was the anti-Muslim video. I assume that she inwardly doubted that, but that she also had the CIA saying that that was it. She could have told Chelsea that because she believed it. She didn't necessarily have to be, quote, lying, which is the difference between believing something and being sincerely wrong versus lying. And I think that's where the Republicans have always made a mistake, jumping to the lie word. And just so that you know how consistent I am, when George W. Bush got it wrong about the weapons of mass destruction, I never allowed the word lie to be used when I was on a TV program. I always said he got it wrong because he sincerely believed there were weapons of mass destruction. It turned out the intelligence community was wrong. I assume Hillary Clinton sincerely believed what she told Chelsea or the Egyptian foreign minister. But at that time, the public had to be looking at the CIA version, and the administration had to be looking at the CIA version as the credible version for that moment while the events evolved.
Lanny, at least 3 of the family members of the 4 dead Americans have publicly said they were lied to. Do you think they were deceived by the Republican talking points?
First of all, when people use the word lie, and if they're grieving for their loved ones, I cannot blame them for using words that they don't mean. They are saying that somebody is intentionally saying something they know is not true, rather than being simply wrong. In the case of Hillary Clinton telling Chelsea or the Egyptian prime minister, and I wasn't there, and I can only assume since I've not talked to her, I'm sure that inwardly she believed, as she wrote in her book, that there had to be something planned with all the armaments that were used. But the CIA also saw from varieties of intelligence sources, some of them from the air, some of them on the ground, we don't know. They said it was triggered by the anti-Muslim video and the demonstration was, quote, spontaneous. That was the first sentence of every draft of the talking points that ended up with Susan Rice on Sunday television. Now, Larry, you haven't heard this probably before, even though it is an indisputable fact. I say indisputable because I've read all 14 versions of the talking points, the first one that came from the CIA, number 14 after being edited by lots of people. That sentence never changed. I believe that Hillary Clinton wrote in her book that she doubted that that could have been the only reason, and she must have been saying to both her daughter as well as to others that she thought that there was a planned element of this entire thing. That's my logic. I don't assume lie, just as I didn't with George W. Bush. I'm sorry the families jumped to the word lie. They could say she made a mistake. No problem with that. But lie is a different word.
In defense of the families and others who are skeptical, Lanny, I think the reason is because Obama, 50-some days before the election, repeatedly said GM is alive, Osama bin Laden is dead, al-Qaeda is on the run. This attack at the Benghazi consulate would have been completely inconsistent with Obama's re-election talking point narrative.
He actually never said that. That's a political argument. It's a reasonable political argument.
He never said which.
He never said that we have a narrative that Benghazi had to have been spontaneous because we have decimated.
I didn't say that. I said he said GM is alive, Osama bin Laden is dead, al-Qaeda is on the run. He said that repeatedly. The Benghazi attack would have been inconsistent with that narrative.
The Benghazi attack would have been inconsistent with that narrative is an argument. It's not a fact. It's a reasonable statement for you to make.
I just said this is why people are skeptical, Lanny. That's all I'm saying.
I grant they're allowed to be skeptical, and it's reasonable to be skeptical. It's reasonable for the argument I just heard that it was, quote, inconsistent with the narrative. That's an argument that doesn't make it a fact. The fact is that there was a lot of confusion about how that arose, and if that argument makes sense to you, then how do you explain the CIA was the originator of the spontaneous demonstration triggered by the Muslim video? Were they part of the political apparatus of the White House? Has anyone dared, during the hearings, did Congressman Jordan accuse the CIA of carrying the water of the political narrative of the White House? You know what, Larry? Nobody has had the you-know-what to say that sentence out loud, even though they all know, including the Republican Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers, who said this was not part of a political narrative, this came from the CIA, and they made a mistake, yes, but there was no intentional deception.
There were 600-some-odd requests from the Benghazi compound requesting more security. They never reached Hillary's desk. However, she was in constant communication with Sidney Blumenthal, who was not an employee of the State Department, had never been to Libya, was not an expert in Libya. Explain to me the apparent contradiction.
Well, I have to tell you, I don't see any contradiction, much less an apparent one, but let me at least also ask you to fact-check the number 600, where you got it from, where did they get it from, and who counted? Because I have at least some skepticism, a word you allowed me to agree with earlier.
Well, that's the number that I heard someone mention at the committee.
You know, the fact-checkers love tracking down numbers that have been repeated so often that you think they're true. But anyway, putting that aside, there were too many unanswered requests.
Right.
And the one person who was most critical of the failure to respond to those requests from her friend Chris Stevens, as well as from many others, was Hillary Clinton, who ordered a study and was the first Secretary of State to ever order an Accountability Review Board independent study by a former Republican ambassador, Thomas Pickering, and a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen. And their report said there was a systemic failure at the State Department, and Hillary Clinton, for the first time, published that report, including those words, and she took every recommendation from them and began to implement them because she knew that there were serious problems in the non-responsiveness within the department. And then she said, I take responsibility because it's on my watch and I'm secretary. So nobody could have been more disappointed. As she said the night of the hearings, Larry, she lost more sleep than all those members put together. So I can assure you that she took to heart the problem of not responding and having more security. I didn't see one Republican say, you know, Secretary Clinton, we take responsibility in cutting the budget for security of diplomatic embassies around the world, which the Republicans did do. And they didn't take responsibility for that either. So there's Lanny, a lot of blame to spread around here.
So are you suggesting the reason the requests for more security were not agreed to is because of Republican cuts?
I said systemic failure. Hillary Clinton took responsibility for what the Accountability Review Board found, and the Republicans' response to my answer is, well, you know, we don't think that the Accountability Review Board should be taken seriously because they didn't interview Hillary Clinton. So, in other words, now we have the CIA in a plot with Barack Obama to spin the talking points. Now we have Admiral Michael Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and a Republican longtime career diplomat, widely respected Tom Pickering, covering up for Hillary Clinton. This is the right-wing conspiracy theory that I don't actually buy as some evidence that they're a little bit crazy, because they never mention the CIA. They don't mention Pickering and Mullen's career. They just say, oh, the Accountability Review Board was in on the fix. Well, guess what? They called it a systemic failure, and Hillary Clinton took responsibility.
So it's partly the right-wing conspiracy that you don't buy, but you still brought up anyway. Lanny, let's talk. Well, let's talk about.
I also did it with a smile.
Let's talk about Hillary's use of private email and a private server. The CIA director, John Brennan, has had his emails that were on his personal email hacked, and they've now been published by WikiLeaks. Aside from all the politics, all the right-wing conspiracy stuff, don't you think it is a grave concern that Hillary decided to use a private server and private email, and that it's very likely that her email has been hacked and that lives and methods and sources could very well have been compromised?
Well, first of all, thank you for the way you phrased the question. We haven't yet gotten to issues that Americans are really voting on, like education, jobs, and all that, but I hope we do. But thank you for asking that question, because you change from a fact, which is what happened at the CIA, at OMB, at the White House, at the State Department, at the Department of Defense, which is hacking into U.S. government servers. And then you said what might be the case in the private server of Hillary Clinton. And I agree with you. It's a serious concern. It has already been a reality. Had she used the U.S. government server, we know that's been hacked into by the Russians, the Chinese, and everybody else. And it's possible that her own private server could be hacked into as well. And I think it's a legitimate question. What I don't accept is that it's more dangerous for her to be worrying about hacking with a private server. Maybe we don't have any evidence of that, but maybe, yes, as opposed to what we know is the case, which is every one of those agencies, including Mr. Brennan at the CIA, can be hacked into. So, no, I don't accept that there's greater danger having Hillary Clinton with her own private server. There certainly is danger that her server could have been hacked into, but we know the U.S. government has already been hacked into.
Lanny Davis, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for having me.